Well, hello there. You are watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer Sonia Sodha and the columnist for TheArticle Ali Miraj. Great to see both of you. So, as ever, let's head to the front pages, starting with The Times, which has the arrival of President Biden in Belfast for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, with the president saying peace is his top priority. The Eye has news of a bleak economic forecast for the UK from the International Monetary Fund, which is predicting the country will see the weakest growth of any G7 nation. The Guardian leads with the sacking of the CBI Director General, Tony Danker, over allegations about his behaviour at work, claims that he has denied. Daily Mail claims an exclusive with a story that a leader of England's striking junior doctors has gone on holiday while his colleagues are on the picket line. That's also the lead for The Telegraph. Union boss on holiday as doctors walk out, their headline. The Metro carries statistics showing that a mobile phone is stolen in London every 6 minutes. The Express says the bosses of Wimbledon have been accused of handing Vladimir Putin a win by allowing Russian tennis players to compete at this year's tournament. The FT has a story involving the financial consultancy firm EY, better known as Ernst & Young. And The Star ponders the prospect of AI football managers. Top marks for the headline, Robo Klopp. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR codes you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages while you watch us. So let's head straight to our guests then, Sonia Sodha and Ali Miraj. And Sonia, The Times with Joe Biden on the front page. Peace is priority, he says, not surprisingly. We know he's a great supporter of the Good Friday Agreement. But something of a family affair for him, arriving with his sister Valerie, his son Hunter as well, departing off in the Beast, obviously. But you know, it's about Northern Ireland and about the homecoming to Ireland, to the Republic as well for him.
That's right. It's very much a visit with twin purposes. It's his first state visit as president to Ireland, and obviously he's an American president with Irish roots. He's going to be conducting some visits with a sort of extended distant family members while he's in Ireland. He's going to be visiting the birthplace, Carlingford, of, I think it's his great-grandfather, but don't quote me on that, please. But it's obviously a huge visit as well, coming out on the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and at a time when the Stormont Assembly still isn't sitting, hasn't been sitting for many months now, when the DUP put a stop to power sharing because they were unhappy with the terms of Brexit. And, you know, a deal has just been passed around kind of Brexit and you know, a deal that we hope can continue avoiding the need for a hard border on the island of Ireland, which is so critical to maintaining the stability of the Good Friday Agreement that was signed 25 years ago. So it's a hugely symbolic visit. I think it'd be very important to people on both sides of the border in Ireland. But I think also you've got to have realistic expectations for it, and that's what Tony Blair has been warning about in the last couple of days. He says it's a really important visit, but we shouldn't kind of expect magic from this. You know, it's not like Biden being there and putting pressure on the DUP is suddenly going to magically end up in, you know, in the DUP agreeing to go back to the table and resurrect Stormont. We don't think, anyway.
Yes, I think it's his great-grandfather, in terms of County Louth and Carlingford Castle, James Finnegan, and his great-great-great grandfather in terms of County Mayo as well. The Blewitts of County Mayo, and certainly Joe Blewett, a third cousin of Mr Biden, saying there's a great buzz in the area ahead of the president's arrival. And the great-great-great-grandfather, Edward Blewett, sold 27,000 bricks to a cathedral where Mr Biden will be speaking on Friday in 1827, which helped him to afford to buy tickets for himself and his family to sail to America decades later in 1851. So some lovely family tales for him. But the bottom line, I suppose, for Northern Ireland, Ali, is a slight sense of disappointment. He was supposed to go and speak to the Northern Ireland Assembly. Stormont was supposed to be back up and running. It is not. You know, it's all been scaled back a bit, hasn't it?
Well, that's true to a degree, but then Stormont's not up and running for a very simple reason, which is the DUP won't play ball and go back into a power-sharing government. And frankly, the DUP have been on the wrong side of the argument for the last 25 years. They opposed the Good Friday Agreement. They voted for Brexit. Heaven knows only why, because what were they thinking? There would have to be a border somewhere. That border was either going to be on the island of Ireland or it was going to be in the Irish Sea. And it ended up being in the Irish Sea, and they felt like second-class citizens. So heaven knows what they were thinking when they voted for it. I mean, if you remember at the time, both Tony Blair and John Major went to Northern Ireland to point out this border issue back in 2016. So the DUP have got to come clean and explain what on earth they were thinking at the time. They had a chance to redeem themselves on this Windsor framework, where again they're bedding down. But the problem for the DUP, I think, is they run the risk of becoming increasingly irrelevant over time. You now have a situation where Sinn Féin, I mean, this was never expected, would be the largest party. You're going to have a Sinn Féin First Minister. You've got optically the DUP playing second fiddle, and the DUP is going to go into utter irrelevance unless it actually steps up and does what's right for the people of Northern Ireland, for all the people of Northern Ireland, which is get back into power sharing. Because the last thing we want, and this is why this thing that we're looking at now, 25 years, this historic landmark is so important, because no one wants to go back to 30 years of the Troubles, where 3,600 people lost their lives, including in the Omagh bombing in 1998, when 29 people died, which is the bomb that went too far. No one wants that. So the DUP needs to step up. And Blair's right, and Sonia's mentioned it. Tony Blair's right. The US president cannot force people to do things. They can cajole. And if you remember back 25 years ago when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, Senator George Mitchell, who chaired the talks, almost acted like the midwife at the birth of this agreement. And you had big leaders at the time, David Trimble, John Hume, Adams, McGuinness, all of them. And that agreement gave each party just enough to live with. No one was completely happy, but that's what leadership is about. And at the moment, we're not seeing that same leadership from the DUP. It's time to step up.
OK, well, the DUP will be among those 5 main political parties to meet Joe Biden tomorrow. There will not be a formal group meeting, we are told. That's what the White House said this evening. A bilateral too with Rishi Sunak, and then the speech, obviously, at Ulster University. So lots more coverage of that tomorrow. Let's move on to what's happening now and for the next couple of days as well. Sonia, the junior doctors' strike, it comes after a bank holiday weekend as well, compounds, if you like, the difficulties. And we're hearing already coverage of the night shifts could be difficult, keeping patients safe amid these days of strikes.
Yeah, that's right. So this is a really significant strike. I think it's the longest consecutive strike that we've seen so far in the health service. 4 days. It comes after a 3-day bank holiday weekend, sandwiched in between 2 weekends. That's sort of 9 days of the NHS without kind of proper medical cover. And it really does seem, you know, we've talked about the sort of the standoff between the government and the unions in other areas of the health service, in other areas of the public sector, like with teachers. It really does seem to be a real sticking point here. So you've got the BMA asking for 35% pay rise. That's actually much higher than nurses. Their argument would be, well, junior doctors, it's highly skilled work and our members just aren't paid enough. They've certainly seen a real terms decline in pay over the last 12 years. And then you've got the government on the other side saying, well, 35% is just ridiculous. You know, we need the BMA to come down in order to start talks. And I think a lot of people might be like, well, where's, you know, 35% might seem high, particularly when you consider the nurses are asking for 19%. But, you know, where's the government's counteroffer? This is hugely disruptive for the NHS. There's going to be many operations, examples of elective care cancelled these few days. Lots of people are going to be really concerned about that. People who've waited months for operations now being told that they're going to have to wait even longer. And as the clinical director of the NHS, Stephen Powis, has said today, this is not going to, you know, this isn't disruption that's just going to last for 4 days or even just the 9 days of the 2 weekends on either side. You know, this is going to cause knock-on impacts for the NHS for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I think it's just more grim news, really, for patients. You know, obviously you've got NHS staff who are saying we can't be taking a real terms pay cut. We need to see pay restored to where it was. And, you know, it sort of feels like it's patients caught between the middle of this fight between the government and medical staff.
Well, the government, of course, says it's unaffordable. Take a look at the front page of the Eye. Possibly you get the small justification for that. More growth, more tax receipts, more Treasury funds for public services. Doesn't look like that's going to happen for the UK, which will be, the IMF said today, the worst performing of the G7 nations, Ali.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always thought, Anna, that we were getting a little bit ahead of ourselves when the Office for Budget Responsibility is saying that by the end of the year, inflation is going to be down at 2.9%. I mean, I'm not holding my breath on that at all. It's still 10.4 at the moment. Interest rates are 4.25%. The Bank of England's got a serious job to do, which is get that inflation down. And it's remaining stubbornly high. Part of the reason for that is because we have a very tight labor market. There are skill shortages all over the place. Labor costs are going up. It's very, very difficult for employers to hire people at the moment. So this is not going to be an easy time at all. And in the meantime, you've got the NHS doctors. And by the way, I defer to no one in my respect for the NHS. My mother was an NHS doctor for 40 years, but 35% is just not realistic. The nurses started at 19. That was also not realistic at all. I understand why doctors want a decent pay rise. They're saying that they've had a 25% real terms pay cut in the last 15 years. Of course, inflation at 10.4%. Of course, they want a decent pay rise. But 35% is completely unaffordable. We've got over 2 trillion of public debt. We spent 400 billion on COVID. We just can't afford it. People have to realize that if they want that kind of pay, they're going to have to be cuts made elsewhere. Where are those cuts going to be made? Education sector, the teachers want pay rises. The defense sector, we've got a war going on in Eastern Europe. So where is this money going to come from? Unless you tax people even higher. And the top tax rate is now affecting people at 125 grand as well. So the taxes have also gone up. And when we wanted to also increase national insurance by 1.25%, everyone was having a hissy fit about it. So we've got to be realistic in this country. Do we want Scandinavian-style healthcare at American levels of taxation? You can't have both. We need to have a proper public discourse about what we want to pay for public services and also how we reform them. And credit to the Labour Party on this, by the way. At least Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, is saying that there needs to be NHS reform. We spend loads of money on the NHS. It's not that we do not spend a fair proportion compared to other nations. We do, but we still have very poor outcomes. So it's not just about pay, it's also about public sector reform as well.